Very good. Thank you. It took a couple
Okay.
times. So I'm Dennis Rodoni. I'm District 4 Supervisor, and I proudly represent Eastern San Rafael, where this important project is taking place. And I want to thank Marin Audubon and Barbara Salzman for inviting me here tonight. So why are we here tonight? Tonight we're here to engage the community, to get input from the community and hear updates about this important project. And at the end, we'll answer any questions that you may have about this project.
Good evening. What I'd like to do is to cover the public process and how you can participate and comment on the project and the draft environmental impact report that's been prepared for this project. And Olivia, if I'm going too fast, please raise your hand, okay? The project is subject to many permits and approvals, not only from the city of San Rafael, but from other state agencies. And the state laws require that before you issue permits or approvals, you must complete an environmental analysis, which is why a draft environmental impact report has been prepared. And ESA will talk about that in a few minutes. The environmental impact report has to be completed and certified before the city or any of the state agencies can take action on the project. And like the permit process, the draft environmental impact report is subject to public review, which is why we're bringing it to your attention this evening. Marco, if you could pull up the link or the sheet with all the links to the documents on share screen, that would be great. I'd like to at least refer to those. And this gives you an idea. One, in the short term, the draft environmental impact report has been published. There's a required public review period that is being observed right now. And the San Rafael Planning Commission is going to hold a public hearing on the draft environmental impact report on October 26th. Now, I do want to make some comments about this because this is the first step in the public review process where you have an opportunity to participate and comment on this project. Many agencies and a lot of public interest groups are used to and familiar with the environmental impact review process and reviewing EIRs. But from the general public standpoint, most of you are unfamiliar with environmental impact reports and what they analyze. And these documents tend to be very large and technical. And if you pull up one of these links where you will find a series of chapters with all of these topic areas, it might be a bit daunting or overwhelming to you. And what I would like to suggest for the general public, the best place to start that gives you an overview of the project and the environmental impacts is a section entitled Summary. So when you pull up one of these links, you're going to have these additional links to all of these different chapters to the environmental impact report. And the summary is the best section to review if you've never reviewed an EIR before. As I mentioned, the Planning Commission is going to be reviewing this draft EIR on October 26th. And this is an opportunity for you, if you have comments on the document, to present them to the Planning Commission, either at that meeting, which is a meeting that is held on the city's YouTube channel, or you could submit comments. If you could scroll down a bit on this, Marco, that would be great. If you see, you can submit comments to the person in Public Works, in the City Public Works Department, Theo Sanchez. If you have comments on the draft EIR, you can submit them to him directly. So that is your first opportunity to comment on October 26th. This will not be the meeting in which the Planning Commission takes action on the permits. That won't happen until later this year, but you can certainly submit comments now if you have any comments on whether you support this project, oppose it, or if you have any concerns. And now is your opportunity to start with those comments And then some of the comments, if they're specific to the project itself, will be carried over and presented to the Planning Commission later this year. It's expected that the Planning Commission will meet and review this project and consider the permits for action in December. So that's what I wanted to present here. And it's kind of backwards here, but Barbara, I don't know. I think we'll hold Q&A till the end, or Supervisor Rodoni.
Yep, thanks.
Okay,
Thank you,
terrific.
Paul. Thank you, Paul. And for those who don't know, Paul was the Director of Community Development in San Rafael until June of last year or this year. And he's now retired, working in his own consulting business, and he lives in San Rafael. So thank you, Paul, for that presentation, and we'll bring that slide back up. So Dane, are you ready to go?
I got a new link from somebody. Can you all hear
Good.
me?
Good job.
Thank you, Arlen. Okay, I will try sharing my screen. Okay, so can you all see this?
Yeah.
Hooray. Okay, let me move this to this. Okay. All right, thank you, Supervisor Rodoni. I'm going to give about, I'm trying to look at the time here. I'm going to try to give about a 10-minute presentation just to reintroduce the project to everyone so that folks are aware of the various details of it. But really, I want to just lead into Elisa Moore from our team, who's going to be talking about the EIR. So this is mostly a refresher, and if you want to see more background on the project, you can look at the Tiscornia Marsh website. TiscorniaMarshP.org has a YouTube video of the last public presentation from last year. I'm mostly going to be focusing on this one, on the details of the project. That one goes more into the background. So I want to say too, I'm here with a few other folks from our design team that worked on this. So I was the project manager for ESA on this. We're working for Marin Audubon Society for Barbara Saltzman, and Ann Borgonovo is here as well. She's an engineer and the project director on our end, and she may help with answering questions that may come up. So I really quickly just wanted to remind everyone of why this project is a thing and why this is happening. I won't go into too much background, but I do want to show this slide. This is sitting at the top of the Alboro Community Center, Pickleweed Park, looking to the east towards Richmond. And this is the existing soccer field, and this is the existing marsh that you all probably recognize. This is Tiscornia Marsh. And these are the PG&E towers and the trail that goes behind the marsh. So essentially what we are looking at with sea level rise is losing the marsh. When we started this project, we looked at the information that was available to us from historical images and people taking photos, and we found that the marsh has been eroding very quickly. It's been eroding at about 3 to 5 feet per year. So if there was no project, essentially what we would be seeing is that the marsh would continue to erode, and eventually there would be no marsh in front of this shoreline trail. And that is a pretty big problem, because that would mean the trail is more vulnerable to erosion. It would mean that the trail would be more vulnerable then to overtopping from tides, high tides and waves. And we would lose all the habitat that this marsh provides. So this project came to be because there was a great need to reverse this loss and preserve the marsh and preserve to provide better flood protection for the community. So this is now looking down at the site. I wanted to show this image with some colorful lines on it just to set you up, to show you what the existing conditions look like. Again, this is the soccer field. This is the Pickleweed Park, the Alboro Community Center. And I wanted to show that the site isn't just that portion of the marsh that's to the east. So the Marin Audubon Society owns this portion of the marsh, but it's important to note that the city of San Rafael has been a really active partner in this project. And so the city owns much of this levee that folks walk around on during the day, and also own this diked, this closed off portion of the marsh to the north of the soccer field and this area to the west. And so the project site actually includes all three of those areas. So it includes the levee, it includes the marsh to the east, it includes this closed off portion, and it includes this ponded area to the west. So right now there's about 8 total acres of tidal marsh. Historically, if you go back to the 1950s or 60s, the marsh actually came out to about here. So we've lost a very large portion of that over time. So I wanted to cover again what the design is. And again, you can see this on the project website, more background on this, but I wanted to talk about again, what are the pieces of that restoration? And so we developed this over the last few years with input from people from the city and from others, people in the community, and our own design team. And so we developed this plan that looks at a few things. Number one is raising the levee behind the site. And I'll show some pictures to show what this might look like. So raising the levee, because this levee is actually pretty low, and we want to use this opportunity to raise the levee and increase flood protection for the community. It also includes these light green areas are where we would restore marsh. So number one, we would build new marsh back where it used to be, where it has eroded. And we would also open up this marsh to tidal action. And because we know that this eastern marsh is vulnerable to erosion, we want to prevent that in the future. So we would be building new marsh, but we would be fronting that marsh with a beach made out of gravel that would block a lot of the energy from tides and waves. And so as part of this portion here where we would open up this closed off marsh, we would essentially we would be building this levee along the northern side of the soccer field first, but we would be then lowering this outer portion of the pathway and then opening this up to tidal action with these tidal channels. And then, so for this portion of the marsh, and also this portion out here, we would want to have a flatter slope for the levee than there is now. Right now, the levee is pretty steep. And so we would have something that's a lot less steep because it will be a lot more stable from erosion. It can have a lot more plants that transition from the marsh to the upland areas. It has a lot more habitat value, and it's more sustainable in the long term. So these dark green areas are where we would have a flatter slope than there is now. And so then we would also be tying off this new levee that goes behind the site. We would be tying off on the western side here. So another thing I want to say too that's important about this project is sea level rise is kind of a new, sea level rise adaptation is something that we've all been trying to figure out in the last few decades. And I say we, meaning engineers, planners, and community members throughout the Bay. And so what that adaptation will look like means a lot of things. And so one thing that this project is important for is we will try some new things. Building new marsh is kind of a new thing, but also one thing that we're trying to do that's very important is we want to take a look at the canal. So San Rafael Canal, San Rafael Creek, right now, every once in a while, this sediment is dredged out of this canal and out of these marinas around the canal and on the bay so that ships can get in and out. And so we want to reuse that material, that dirt that is pulled out of the canal normally has to be taken away from the site and dropped somewhere either in the bay or out in the ocean. We want to find a way of reusing that same material to build this marsh. So that's another important piece of this this project that's kind of a new feature. So I want to show a couple pictures that just show you what I mean about all those things. There's a lot of things I just covered. But this is again sitting on top of the Alboro Community Center. And I'm going to show these 1, 2, 3 images showing what things might look like. So first, looking to the north to that closed off marsh that has the path going around it. this is what it looks like now. So this is the soccer field. These are the soccer goals. And this back here is this closed off marsh. You can see the top of the path, the walking path that goes around it in this green. So we would first be wanting to raise this levee. This would be a new levee along the northern edge of the soccer field. And this would be higher. This would be a higher levee than the existing path that goes around the site now too. So this levee would provide a lot more flood protection than what is out there now. But then after building that, we would open up the marsh to the bay. So what you would see would be quite a bit different. You would actually see a new tidal channel coming in from the canal and winding around through this marsh area. And so I want to point out that this new levee, it would still function as a walking path for the community. So folks that normally walk along this path on the outside edge here would have this as their new path going along the northern edge of the soccer field. So now looking east, this is looking out towards Richmond again. So essentially we would also be raising the levee here. And that's also going to be a walking path. And this is roughly what it would look like to restore that marsh that's been eroded over time. And so this would have the existing edge of the marsh would become a new tidal channel that would come out on the south side that you can't see in this picture. But in the distance, this yellow line here is essentially that beach that would be in front of the marsh. And to show kind of what that would look like, this is from another site farther south in Richardson Bay, where they tried this in 2012. And so it would look something like this, something made out of coarse material like gravel that would have logs and other things in it to stabilize the beach. And then the beach itself stabilizes the marsh behind it. Lastly, I want to look south, and this is still on top of there, but looking towards the 580 bridge in the background. And this is the Spinnaker neighborhood. And this used to be called Schoen Park right here. So essentially what we're looking at is raising this path. This is the lowest part of the levee right now. So this is the most vulnerable part of the levee. So this is the one that we really want to raise this to provide more protection for the canal neighborhood. So we would raise this levee and also push it slightly back and have a flatter slope. This is what I was talking about. This would be vegetated and would have more habitat value, would be stronger against erosion. So I want to talk very quickly about when this might happen and how quickly it might happen. So we are still in the planning phases. So the EIR is out for public comment, but the design will continue for another year or so until we figure out what this all will look like exactly. And then we are looking at hopefully beginning construction in 2023. And so that first year, what we would be looking at is essentially preparing the site in spring. That's Q3 is summer. And preparing the site and then building the beach first over several months. And then waiting another half year or so. And we have to do this because there are endangered bird species that use the site and aquatic species that use the site. And so we need to work outside of those species sensitive windows for when they're using the marsh for nesting and other things. So we would wait some amount of time, and in the next year, this would maybe be 2024, we would raise the levee along the back edge of the site. We would restore that marsh, that eastern portion of the marsh, and then we would let that dry for a period of time. And then in the final year, we would restore the closed off marsh and finish construction of the remaining components, that eroded marsh on the eastern side, and finish the levee, and finally surface that levee and trail as the last piece of this. So this may change over time, but this at this point is what we're seeing as the schedule. And so at this point, I want to pass it off to Elisa to talk about the environmental impact report.
I'll just take a minute to introduce Alicia Moore. Alicia is the Northern California Water Group Director, overseeing a team of nearly 30 water specialists, and is a project manager and compliance specialist for large-scale resource management and facility projects with over 28 years of experience. She has been with ESA for 24 years and currently serves as a trustee for ESA's Employee Stock Ownership Plan. She is a member of ESA's BIPOC Committee and co-manager of NorCal DEI Internship Program. Welcome, Elisa.
Thank you. Hoping everybody can hear me okay, and translation is also okay. Good. I'm going to go through this very quickly because we lost so much time on the technology, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions and answers. And also, fortunately, Paul, his overview of the outreach process coincides with what I was going to present to you in large part. Dana, go ahead and next slide, please. What I do want to just reiterate is a little bit about what the California Environmental Quality Act is and some of the roles and responsibilities for that process as it relates to this project. California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, is guided by some legal requirements under the state of California. And really what it is intended to do is inform the public and other agencies that have review and oversight over the decision-making of a project on the environmental effects of a project. And in this case, the CEQA document or analysis is prepared under the guidance of the CEQA lead agency, which in this case is the city of San Rafael. And as we've heard, Marin Audubon Society is the project proponent. For this project, we prepared an environmental impact report with the city of San Rafael. Next slide, please. Early on in the CEQA process, there was a notice of preparation that was released at the beginning of this year, which underwent a 30-day scoping period. And what that scoping period is really intended to do was collect early input from public and agencies on some overall concepts about the project and get some understanding from you all about what you might be concerned about related to environmental effects, and make sure that we are considering those effects in the CEQA document that was prepared. The CEQA document was prepared, as Paul mentioned, in September, and it was released to the State Clearinghouse, which is a collective under the state of CEQA documents. We've also published this in the newspaper, and this document lives on the city and Marin Audubon Society's webpage, as we saw earlier. There were also notices that were provided to adjacent parcels and other adjacent parties that the EIR was available for comment. The comment period will end at the end of this month, and will end in coincidence with the city's planning commission on October 26, where additional public input will be heard, and the commission will be able to provide their input. Next slide, please. And it's importantly, while Paul already mentioned this, I do want to just reiterate that it's important to hear from you all. And if you would like to provide comments on the EIR, please be sure to do so before October 26th, and that those comments can be submitted to the address shown, which I believe we'll be distributing to everyone that attends tonight. Next slide. And after the comment period closes, we'll be responding to all of those comments, or the city will. The City Planning Department will be responding to those comments and publishing the response to comments prior to decision making on the EIR, as well as the project approval process, which may be as early as December 14th of this year. Next slide, please. And really that's what I want to get to, and make sure that, again, you have the links to these documents that you may find, the CEQA document, and as Paul mentioned, utilizing the summary chapter as your guide and overview of what the document contains. And as we've both mentioned, it's really important that we get your thoughts on the environmental impact report through this public review process. Again, wanted to tighten that up in light of where we are on time, and to make sure that we have plenty of time for questions and answers.
Thank you, Alicia. So this is a great time for the public to ask questions. make comments about this process and what you've heard tonight, and things that you think need to be considered that may not have been considered yet. So feel free to raise your hand, wave your hand, raise your hand virtually, and I'll try and find you. And we'll direct the question to who might be the appropriate panelist to answer it. Can someone bring the full screen back so we can see everyone, please? Thank you. So again, you can wave your hand if you want, raise your hand virtually. We really want to hear your questions tonight and hear your comments. This is your chance to give input to the project. Very important step, one of many, as Paul explained and Alicia explained, but it's important that we hear from the public. And that's you.
I have a question, Dennis.
Thank you. Halu, go ahead. Welcome.
Yeah, the gentleman just said that the project right now is not yet get its approval, meaning that we're still in under discussions. So far I have seen that there are two projects has been subject to the commission. The other one we haven't talked about yet. So one is the one the gentleman just said. How about the other one? The one that build a gate right on the pond, the mouth of the canal. So that one I think will take more time anyway, but we got to discuss that one. So when the project has been submit to the commission, might be the other ones get approval. So we don't know yet. So how about the other one?
Thank you. So who would like to take that question? Paul, I saw you shaking your head, so you're familiar with that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good question because it deals with the bigger picture of flood protection and sea level rise in the greater East San Rafael area. This is I call this a one-off project. It's one of many projects that individually could help combat sea level rise and flooding. But the gentleman's comment is spot on. There is a bigger issue, and that is how are we going to deal with this on a greater scale? And I can tell you this, the city of San Rafael just completed and adopted a general plan update, which includes a commitment to prepare what's called a greater adaptation plan for that entire San Rafael shoreline. And that would look at and analyze bigger projects like, for example, a taller levee along the entire East San Rafael bayfront, or perhaps a tidal gate of sorts at the mouth of the San Rafael Creek. Those are on the table right now to look at, but that's analysis is just in its, I call it infant stages right now. So it's not necessarily part of this project, but it's certainly something that the city's going to be looking at as this effort moves forward. And I know Corey Bidoff is on here and on this call, and he oversees sustainability. Corey, I don't know whether you're here as a resident of the neighborhood, if you want to say anything about this, as you are an active city employee. So,
Corey, if you wish, you have the floor. But I don't think we're going to hear you, unfortunately. You may have to go out and come back, and I'm going to look to Dane and see if he wanted to comment on this, and maybe in particular about this project. How would it impact anything in the future that we might be looking at?
Well, I can say just quickly that the reality with sea level rise, both here in San Rafael and in other cities throughout the Bay, is that you take the opportunities that are become available to you, and it's hard to. San Rafael has a long shoreline, and so this actually, we were fortunate that this project came up because this was one of the lowest parts of the shoreline, and so this is the best opportunity we have right now to protect the canal neighborhood. And as Paul was saying, the longer term, the bigger the whole city looking at sea level rise is going to take looking at lots of parts of the shoreline. And so how that works, it will have to happen in, you know, piece by piece, you know, at the same time as larger scale studies. But we're doing this one right now because it's the opportunity has presented itself to us and we want to go for it.
Can I just add that, just like Dane said, this project is a link in the whole chain of the flood protection system for San Rafael. And so if it'll be compatible with there's other flood protection projects that need to happen to provide full flood protection, but this is a piece of the overall puzzle, and it will be compatible with other flood protection projects being contemplated.
Thank you, Ann. And Corey's coming back. If he gets his sound working, we'll go to him. Corey, you want to try?
Sure. How is that?
There you are. You're good.
Is this thing on? So thank you. Yeah, I popped in the chat. We're working on some grants. We're working with Canal Alliance Multicultural Center Marin and the County of Marin to identify some funding to be able to do some larger explorations of other things that could add to the Tiscornia Marsh project and protect the canal neighborhood for the next few generations. So we just applied for a grant to the Coastal Conservancy. We should hear back in the next month or two about our potential there, and we'll keep you informed for sure. And we're also forming an internal team to do larger adaptation planning around a wide variety of things, you know, smoke and excessive heat and things like that as well.
Alicia, did you want to add anything?
Anne actually just said what I was going to, so.
Okay, terrific. So other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Okay, Barbara, go ahead.
I have a question for Alicia. CEQA, I've been dealing with CEQA a long time. CEQA is supposed to be a disclosure document, as I think you both said, you and Paul. And I wonder if about the impacts of a project, in other words, the effects that a project might have on the community or whatever, or the environment. And I wonder if you could say something about that. What are some of the impacts that the project we've anticipated will have, and how are we proposing to address those so that the impact on the community will be reduced?
Sure, happy to do so. Sorry, there's gonna be a moment of background noise. The City of San Rafael's Planning Department provided the environmental impact report, and ESA supported them on that. So I do want to just say that the city's planning department is not here tonight, so they will be able to present that further at the commission hearing. But for a project like this, I would say that the majority of the impacts that are environmental impacts that are expected are from the construction activities that are necessary to build the project that Dane displayed. That the project will require a good amount of construction activities and earth moving activities to build up this new habitat that was shown, as well as the levee and trail systems as well. And so for this project, we do anticipate that there will be air quality emissions during construction activities that would be mitigated by some erosion, air control, dust control measures, and other methods of construction controls that would reduce the amount of emissions that are experienced during the construction activity time period in the areas that surround the construction activities. There's also potential for a special status animal and plant species to be present at the site that would need to be cleared and worked around during the construction period to ensure that there's not damage, substantial damage or injury to those species. And then there's also a small but recognized potential that although there are no known cultural resources around the site or in the site that are known, there's always a potential that this amount of earth disturbance could yield a discovery of a resource that was not previously known. So those are the main impacts that were identified in the environmental impact report.
So there's going to have to be material brought in both for the levee and the of course we don't know where it's coming from for either one of them, but also for the marsh. So could you say something about that?
Jane, do you want to discuss the project approach to bringing in those materials? If not, I can.
Well, I'm interested in the community knowing, you know, what's going to happen what we expect to have happen when we're getting into construction of the project.
I can
Clever.
say that, yeah, I could say that there's basically, there will be material imported for the project. There's three main things that we're building. There's the beach, there's rebuilding the marsh using dredge sediments, and there's also raising and or building the new levee. And the approach is to have material transported to the site by water as much as possible. It's assumed that the beach material will be delivered by barge to the site. There may be some, when it arrives at the site, it might be transported into trucks and driven around the park, but recognizing that we need to protect the public use of the park at the same time. So that's one big activity is bringing in the beach material. And then we'd be rebuilding the marsh by reusing dredge sediments that will be arriving also by barge and being offloaded kind of just on the edge of the canal from a platform that's sort of out in the water. The third item is raising and building the new levee, and that material most likely will be trucked in. And so that would be arriving through city streets and being trucked to the site.
Thank you, Ann. As a follow-up to that question, there's good public access now. Could you talk a little bit about what access would be lost during the construction and whether there'd be improved access at the end of the project?
Yes, that's a great question. Because yes, you know, we recognize that trail. There's the loop trail around Pickleweed Park. It's such a great trail. And when the project is done, it will be resurfaced. It'll be more even. It will be a little higher, so you might have a little bit better view. But in order to get there, to build that, improve the trail and also set back the trail along the soccer field, there will definitely be periods when the trails are closed. And that's mostly going to be in the fall when the construction, a lot of the construction works are being done in the fall because that's part of the wildlife protection requirements. But there will be periods of closure, and it's described in CEQA generally, and we're looking for, you know, rerouting pedestrian traffic safely during those times.